Welcome to Bridging of Ages. My name is Dan Mendelevitz. Today we're talking about embracing flexible work arrangements. And we want to look at addressing misunderstandings and differing expectations, especially with intergenerational teams. And those of you who've been watching our previous shows know how we talk about how to better enhance your intergenerational teams and how those type of teams have become more productive and are usually more innovative. And to take a look at this, I was working at a large corporation doing projects and programs for them for a fairly large system that was enhancing the business. And what's important is I went in there and the original, they wanted me to be on site. Now, the nature of the work that I was doing is I spoke with people actually all over the world because it was an international project. And what I found is that 95% of the time, I was not interacting with the people who were in the office that I was part of. So what happened is here I was having to go into an office and sitting on the computer and talking to people all over the world. So what I was able to do was work out with the people that the project was for to not come in very often, because often what I had to do is I had to be very flexible. If you're talking to somebody in Asia or you're talking to somebody in Europe, you are not doing it necessarily on regular work hours. And I would frequently have these kind of interactions. So what we worked out is I was able to do it without having to take that almost hour drive to that office and work it out. It made me more productive, and it actually enhanced what the team needed. And when necessary, I would come into the office to meet with the people that I need to do. This is an example of how we can look at the rules that we have and build flexibility into it. Now, that was able to help them understand that I could give them more with the same time frame if I was granted that flexibility that I needed. And it was very successful. We completed it. It actually came in on time and under budget. So that made everybody a little happier. And it's just an example of looking at a system that we have and making it more flexible. And you may find that people in different ages, different experience levels need to have that kind of flexibility so that you can help their productivity. There are times when it really helps to be face to face, but there are also other times when they just need to go off, get away from the noise and the distractions, and do their work. And they may have things outside of work that create instances where if they don't have to come into your office, you can change those kind of things. So I'm very excited today. We have a guest who will be joining us, and we'll have a chance to talk about these flexible work arrangements. So Michael Schnitzler is my guest today. And he's spent his entire career as an entrepreneur and a business development professional. He founded two successful ventures, and he joined the company Insperity in 2007, and he's been there since. Michael's really ongoing commitment is to relieve those constant pressures, and he works with small business owners and not-for-profit associations, and he can increase their odds of achieving long-term, really sustainable success. And he's able with this wonderful company in order to do those kind of things. And through Inspirity's unique business model and service platform, they are really achieving some really exceptional results. And they have hundreds of clients, and he's involved in their designing, implementing, executing all sorts of customized, client-centric approaches, and all the employment related challenges and opportunities, and really help them build in these flexible work arrangements. It's really, I've known Michael for a while, and it's really been a privilege for Michael to be partnering with his clients, and a remarkable, personal experience for him. And he gets to interact with some wonderful people out there. And really, his work still continues. So we'll be talking with Michael about our topic today, and we're really looking forward to that conversation with him. So, after a word from our sponsor, we'll be back to have a great conversation with Michael Schnitzler of Insperity. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, welcome to Bridging of Ages. My guest today is Michael Schnitzler, CBPA of Insperity in the Chicago area. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate you giving me such a great introduction, and it's exciting to be here.
Great. As I said, we'll be talking about flexible work arrangements today. Mm-hmm. And if you could just give us a few moments, tell us what you do with Insperity and the kind of work that you do, and we'll get into our conversation.
Well, I have the privilege, appreciate that. I have the privilege of partnering with many different types of small to mid-sized businesses. And the whole underpinning of our business model and our business philosophy is that for years, small business owners and executive directors, not-for-profits as well, entities with, 5 to maybe 50 to 100 employees have always had a difficult time competing with larger corporations with respect to the benefits that they need to provide to their employees, the underlying administrative burdens associated with compliance, culture, all the things that go into what we like to call human resources, if you will. And so we basically have the opportunity to bring those services and provide small businesses with big company benefits, administrative relief, and systematic ways of improving productivity and performance of their employees.
That sounds great. It sounds like you're very interactive, and it's kind of an iterative approach where you can keep helping them as you engage in with these companies.
Yeah, our clients are typically with us. I mean, every case is different, of course, but typically with us 5 to 10 years. And it takes that long for us to really develop a true partnership model and have an impactful relationship with them, not only with respect to saving them money on the commodities they need to run their business, but helping them improve their revenue per employee through some sophisticated consulting work that we do.
No, that sounds great. Yeah, because one of the things I found, when we talk to others on the show is the difficulty with, the smaller entities, really, like you said, to compete with those large companies. They don't have the resources, right. And it's nice to have a partner that can help you through that.
Yeah, and our topic today really is on point as it relates to the importance of flexibility in the workplace, especially today, and the intergenerational aspect of that, which I know is at the heartbeat of what you're talking about in your show. So I'm kind of excited to get into that topic a little bit and give you hopefully some insights that and some nuggets that people can take and move forward with after the show.
Okay. So when you engage with these companies, I'm curious, how do you approach with them to have them understand that they have to have this flexibility? I understand when an entrepreneur starts a business and they have this great idea and they're working hard, and we all know when you're
Yeah.
an entrepreneur, you're working all the time basically to make this thing happen, and
Yep.
sometimes lose sight, especially as you grow and you start bringing employees on. It becomes a lot more difficult, and you lose track of what best is for those people in order to enhance your business.
Yeah, we see it happen a lot when businesses are starting to grow and reach that an inflection point when they're typically more than, say, 10 employees, because at that point, you're no longer hiring friends and family. You're kind of hiring people you don't know. And when you start hiring people you don't know, you get into the unknowns associated with employee retention, employee engagement, personal issues. And many entrepreneurs are not prepared for the complexity of the business of being an employer, because they're focused on the business of whatever they happen to be doing. So you really have to really understand the complexity. There's an old saying, business would be easy if it weren't for the people. So, we have to address the people issues, which frequently go unaddressed when entrepreneurs are starting out.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a totally different skill set, and to be an entrepreneur and to have employees, and you help them fill that gap.
Well, and especially today, flexible work arrangements today, 2 in 3 workers rank workforce flexibility as more important. And I'm talking about things like where they work from, whether it's hybrid or whether it's completely remote, the hours they work, how their work is measured. More important to them today than compensation, PTO, healthcare, even 401k, more important. So, and as the Gen X and the millennial generations continue to dominate the workforce, because all of us baby boomers are starting to phase out on a regular basis, 10 people retiring every day. 55% of the workforce today is comprised of Gen X or millennials, and their expectations around autonomy and work-life balance are only going to get more important. And if businesses are not nimble enough to recognize this, they're going to fall behind, and they're going to see increases in turnover rather than improved retention. And that's a very expensive problem. So it's a very important issue for businesses to get their head around. Small businesses, middle market businesses, and large enterprises as well.
I think people don't realize how expensive it is to replace somebody, as well as the knowledge loss and
the tribal knowledge associated with what people have learned. It's very
expensive. Yeah, I like to call it the folklore of the company, which gets lost when people move out. And one of the things that we used to find before I was doing more work on the business side, I used to be in the technical arena, and they would ask us to automate some things that people were doing. And one of the things that I found is a lot of times they wouldn't ask the workers how they worked. We all developed shortcuts in our work to get it done. And when you have to put that into a system, or you have to teach it to somebody else, if they just leave and you lose that knowledge, that sets you back a piece. And I would imagine the resources of a smaller business, it's they can't absorb that as well as the larger ones can.
We have a saying at Insperity: you either have a culture by design or you have a culture by default, one or the other.
Okay.
Right. So if you have a culture by design, and you're being proactive about the importance of developing a culture. And what we should talk a little bit about culture, because I think it's congruent with the whole issue of flexibility. Flexibility is great, but if you don't compare that with clear performance metrics, with ways of determining performance and recognizing performance, and having clear expectations, and recognizing that people are recognized differently based upon, or wish to be recognized differently or rewarded differently based upon where they are in their life. Baby boomers have different needs than Gen X's do. And if you are measuring people the same way, it might work for one generation, it may not work for the other. So having clear expectations, defining these things, taking the time to be proactive about it, is an important component of a flexible workplace. If you only have a flexible workplace on paper, that's not necessarily recognizing the importance of, all right, how do you measure performance now, and how do you determine fairness? How do you deal with time zone differences? So one group that's working out in California is not penalized because you're having meetings at 9 o'clock in the morning Central Time, which is not convenient for them to get their kids to school. And there's a lot of issues like this that sometimes get lost in the translation.
Yeah, I mean, a good example of what I talked about when when we first started today is, I was dealing with time zones all over the world.
Yeah.
And in order to get people together at certain times, I had to recognize where they were at.
Yeah.
And some of them were in even a different day when you started to talk, to Asia and stuff.
Yeah.
But even just within, the US, you're right. Those few hours can make quite a difference.
Absolutely. And, another point, workplace flexibility is actually a unique thing because you look at other ways of motivating employees, traditional ways, increasing compensation, bonuses, higher contributions by the company towards healthcare benefits, matches on 401k. These all drain the financial resources of the business. They cost money. Workforce flexibility actually can save the company money. And so it's one of those unique benefits that if it's put together properly and proactively, it can actually save financial resources rather than drain financial resources. So it's a really a win-win for it's a win for the business, it's a win for the employees, and it's a win really for even for the customers of that company, because they're getting better customer service. So it generally results in a more favorable overall outcome if it's managed correctly. A lot of businesses don't manage it properly, and therefore it falls short. And I'll talk a little bit about the importance of how leadership has to change sometimes in an environment to adapt properly to a flexible workplace. Sometimes that's difficult for leadership that's been doing it one way for so long, and now all of a sudden they realize it doesn't necessarily work in a flexible environment.
Yeah. So how do you address, there's a lot of myths around flexible work relationships. And I'm curious how you address those myths with your clients so that you can help them, because I've also mentioned many times in previous shows about it's all great that we're talking about, intergenerational teams and the mentoring and the reverse mentoring, all that stuff. But if the leadership is not trained properly, it usually doesn't work. And I know they have they think they know what it is, and you're coming in with your experience able to help them change that.
Well, I think there's something we need to talk about here called the philosophy of servant leadership. And servant leadership, for those of, we kind of live it every day. It's kind of embedded in the DNA of our organization, which makes it easier for us to talk about it with our clients. But in essence, servant leadership is leadership coming from a place where they're putting the needs of other people ahead of themselves. They're basically of the mindset that it's not a leadership first. It's not a leader first mindset. It's a service first mindset. It's not power and control. It's empowering others. It's how can I help my team generate the results that we need? How can I do that as a leader rather than just relying on my team to achieve the results on their own? It's a philosophy of shared responsibility for the outcomes we're looking for rather than top-down authority. So if you have a leadership philosophy that is embracing this concept of servant leadership, you create a very different culture. You create a culture where people are able to talk about whatever they need to talk about without fear of retribution or fear of being judged or being stereotyped. And,
Sure.
it creates an atmosphere where, say, reverse mentoring with new Gen X people mentoring people that have been with the company for 15 or 20 years on new technology and CRM systems, whatever it may be,
Sure.
is no longer, a difficult thing to accomplish. So I think that's really an important thing. And to get to your question about myths, there's a myth that flexible work will decrease productivity. And we find that if it's done properly, just the opposite occurs, that you actually have measurable, impactful results where with the right structure, productivity can increase because people are, because leadership is no longer managing time, they're really managing outcomes. And leadership are no longer viewing themselves as supervisors as much as they're viewing themselves as coaches. And so you have a
That's that's an
collaborative.
important difference, certainly. Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. So I think
Okay.
I think
Well,
that's
we'll go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, remote work for being in a remote environment does not always mean that you're always on and always available. There has to be some lines of demarcation.
Yeah.
There has to be some off time, so that people realize that if you're, let's say, if you have one device, you have your phone, and you're working remotely, and you get a text at 8 o'clock at night, and it's on your personal device. Okay, so the tendency might be to respond to it, even though you're not working at that time. And you start doing that, and all of a sudden, the lines blur between your personal time and your work time. So we like to encourage people to have two devices, really, one for work and one for personal, so that you can maintain your boundaries and make sure that you recognize that there are times that you should just not be available. And I think there's a myth that if you're working remotely, you're always available. And it's really
that's also not healthy.
No, it's not healthy. And we find people that do that can burn out.
Sure. So let's take a short break.
Sure.
We're going to have a note from our sponsor. When we come back, we'll resume our conversation with Michael Schnitzler.
I look forward to it. Thanks, Dan.
Hello, welcome back to Bridging of Ages. If you're just joining us, my guest, Michael Schnitzler, we are talking about embracing flexible work arrangements. And Michael, I appreciate you were talking about servant leadership and putting bounds around what flexible work really means. And one of the things that we like to address here a lot is really those intergenerational teams, because what I have found is that often they reflect what your customer base is.
Yes, absolutely.
And when you have a team that has different ages and experience levels, they can relate to the people that your business is selling to. And I'm curious, in your work, have you found with the businesses you work with that this ability to integrate those teams. You mentioned earlier about the, finding the way to communicate properly and those kind of things. I always like to find kind of a central place and allow the flexibility of people who are just into text or just into talking to allow that kind of thing. But we all have to have one place where we can talk together.
Yes.
Which is also very important. So I'm curious if you've come across that kind of intergenerational.
Yeah, it's a very interesting challenge. Flex arrangements, done properly, can reduce what I like to call generational friction, accommodating different work styles. Baby boomers like you and myself, just kind of generalizing, we generally prefer face-to-face interactions. That's the world we've come from in the past. And, most of the business I've done in my career has been done across the table from a customer or a client. But now, of course, we're in a different world, and millennials and Gen X's are not necessarily that comfortable with face-to-face interactions. They lean digital, and they're more comfortable with what we're doing here today with the digital interaction.
Sure.
And even then, many of them don't even turn their pictures on because they just prefer to hide behind their names. So you have younger generations, especially the Gen X and the millennial generations, that prefer a technology-oriented workplace that try to close deals via text or via email. And so you have all of these sort of intergenerational conflicts that people need to recognize. And I think that, flexibility, if done properly, can build a culture of inclusivity. And it's up to leadership to recognize that if you've got a multi-generational workforce, that we need to, first of all, develop a culture where we're avoiding what I would call ageist stereotypes in order to create comfortable collaborative relationships. Sometimes people assume, let's say, a baby boomer is, mediocre or bad at technology, and therefore, they treat them as if they can't do it. And then sometimes, conversely, we baby boomers may assume that a Gen X person, based upon the way they interact, might be just lazy and entitled, and we're not comfortable with how they do things because we're not used to it. So I think it's just a matter of embracing these individual differences. And again, as I say, a servant leadership environment does contribute to that, because if leadership is acting in a manner that's consistent with this kind of empathy and this type of respect with respect to all of the workers on the team, it creates a much better environment for accomplishing what is sometimes sort of like a hidden bias that people don't even realize they have against people that are not of their generation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of unconscious bias that is built into us. We don't even realize we have it.
Right.
And you had mentioned earlier the importance of training the leadership.
Yeah.
Especially in the servant, and how to approach their teams with flexibility, how to learn how to hire to that, to retain to that, to encourage, and as you said, it's becoming the most important piece for people to have that flexibility. And, many of us know that we have obligation for children, we have obligation for older parents. There's things that have to happen that could affect our work. And if we had to be sitting in a chair in an office for 8 hours, we might be less productive because we're thinking about those things outside.
Yeah, I think you need to understand that different people of different generations have different motivators, different underlying ways that they would like to be recognized and perhaps rewarded for the work that they do, especially if they're achieving whatever metrics they are established for them. For example, baby boomers today on the precipice of retirement, let's say, are nearing retirement, they're going to be driven by compensation, usually 401k contributions, matching, bonuses, things that will help them achieve a more comfortable exit strategy, if you will.
Sure.
The older we get, the more important that may be. And they're also concerned about their healthcare coverage and making sure that they have a comfortable situation with respect to that, especially as they get closer to Medicare age. Conversely, a millennial, a Gen Zer, maybe their needs may be more broad and more varied. They may have student loans that they need to repay, cover cost of childcare, more flexibility with respect to picking up their kids after school, more flexibility with respect to setting up dependent, flexible spending accounts in order to accommodate the costs of childcare, extra time off to spend with their families for travel and for vacations and so forth. So everyone is unique, and rewarding and recognizing people the same way multi-generationally is not necessarily the best idea in order to create an environment where people are motivated and a culture of, if you will, optimal performance. I like to call it discretionary, a culture of discretionary effort, where if the boss isn't there, people are still working with the idea that I'm thinking more like a business owner than I am as just a 9-to-5 job. If you can create that kind of a mindset across the organization, your business has a chance of not only succeeding, but being in, the top 10% of businesses out there, because the vast majority of the clients we see before we start working with them do not have a workforce with that kind of a mindset.
No, I can see that. I mean, I've done work in, large and small companies, and one of the things that I've noticed is, I would come to my team and ask them, do you understand how what you're doing day to day helps the business, works towards its profit?
Yes, exactly.
And I believe most people don't know that.
No, they don't. Most people don't know that, or they don't necessarily are not. It's even worse than that. That the management doesn't necessarily even want or care that they know that. So
that goes back to you talking about training your
exactly.
leadership.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's all about alignment. Especially as your businesses grow, it's about alignment. Not to get into that's a whole different subject, but where you have management teams where you ask them the same question, what's the mission of the company, and you get you get 5 people in a room and you get 6 different answers. I mean, that's a problem that needs to be addressed as well. If people are not consistent with their and congruent, so that all teams are working with the overall success of the business in mind. It may not be good for their department. The decision may not be good for their department, but it may be good for the business.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah. So how do you, when you come into a business or a nonprofit organizations, how do you impress upon them why this is so important?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's not an easy question.
I understand.
Yeah. Well, if it was easy, I guess you'd have somebody else on the show. But you start with clarity. I mean, you have to start from a point where defining your terms. You need communication norms. You need to understand what success in that business would actually look like. So, if you're going to have remote teams, you have to have structure to avoid confusion, to avoid misalignment, and to reduce turnover. So if you're going to introduce this, you need to make sure everybody's on the same page and how you're going to roll it out. You need to train your leaders. We were talking about that. We need to train leaders how to manage hybrid on-site, hybrid, and remote workers effectively, fairly, and so that, I'll give you a quick, silly example maybe, but, there was a company that was struggling with when workers were going hybrid, they would struggle with, how are we going to pay for their laptop? Are we going to pay for their laptop if they have it at home, or are we going to make them pay for it? Well, little things like that are irritants to employees that are trying to, make it happen in their company based upon their own situation. They want to embrace a hybrid work style, and now all of a sudden they're being faced with these new, unexpected irritants, penny wise and pound foolish, if you will. So that's another issue. Building a time zone. We talked about building a time zone sensitive model. It's amazing to me how many people don't even think about it, but they've got workers all over the country, sometimes all over the world, and they're arranging meetings at inopportune times. So you try to, there's not a perfect answer, but you try to be fair. Sometimes one group is inconvenienced, sometimes another group is inconvenienced. And then as we talk about creating strong work-life boundaries, we talked about that. So these are all areas that need to be discussed, and handbooks, policies, procedures need to be updated in order to, if you will, make them sort of official and appropriate for the business. And sometimes there are compliance issues too at the state, federal level that need to be incorporated. So all of these things need to be broached. But I tell you, it can make a huge difference if you do it properly and you roll it out properly. People really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm sure we have enough for probably 3 more shows. But I appreciate you taking time today to talk with us, and been some great insights on embracing the flexible work arrangements and the work that you do, and helping the leaders and owners of these companies, have the opportunity to really excel, with their workforce. Yeah.
We have teams with subject matter experts that do this work on a day-to-day basis. They get to know their clients get to know us, and we really partner with them, almost like an extension of their HR department, if you will. So a small to mid-sized company can have the same level of sophisticated expertise as a larger business, and that's really the secret sauce, if you want to call it that. So, yeah, okay. I appreciate you having me. It's an exciting topic, and you're right. We could continue this conversation for another couple hours, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I love the competitive advantage that you bring to these companies, and it's wonderful. Well, thank you, and we're gonna take a short break for a word from our sponsor, and when we come back, we'll be wrapping up our conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Dan.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, welcome to Bridges of Ages. We'd like to take a look at a few action items from our conversation with Michael today. And looking at action item 1, we want to examine our flexible work schedules. Now, we're not just looking at them, because the how is very important. And as Michael was talking about, they have experts that can help you with that, but also the why of it. And that's really where you have to learn as a leader in order to understand why you're doing this and how it can help your business. So the first action that I suggest you take is really examine that and look at those flexible work schedules and how they will help your workers and how they will enhance your business. Action item 2. Determine how the flexibility can enhance your team performance. So you really have to learn how to wrap some metrics around it, see how it's enhancing the business, what's working, what isn't. And also, as Michael talked about, people in different stages of their life, different ages, different experience levels will approach this differently. Some people can work remote for a long time. Some need to be in the office. You have different types of work that are done in your business, and you can, if you have the flexibility, you can adjust that for the different workers in order to enhance their performance for your business. So look at that and determine really how that flexibility is going to help you for the different types of workers that you have in your business. Action item 3. Set up a feedback loop to see what works. So we talked about you need metrics. And as Michael talked about, what is very powerful and very important is the leadership has to be trained to do this properly and to examine it. The servant leadership that Michael talked about is critical for this to work because, especially with intergenerational teams, and as we've talked in the past, that they're very powerful. They represent your customer base better. They are more productive and can become much more innovative because you have people looking at it from different experience levels. But if the leadership isn't tied into that and understanding how they can tweak it, understand it, make it work better, it's not going to work. So really set up that feedback with your workers in a non-threatening way so that they know they can come to you and help you enhance your business and be more productive. And that comes to the tip of the day, which really talks again about leadership, preparing and train your leadership for success. We often talk about training our workers, but we don't always talk about training our leadership. And it's important to do all of those. So once again, action item number 1, examine our flexible work schedules. Action item 2, determine how flexibility can enhance your team performance. Action item 3, set up a feedback loop to see what works. And our tip of the day is prepare and train your leadership for success. This has been another Bridging of Ages. My name is Dan Mendelevitz. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Invest in brain power, fuel brilliance.